Welcome in, meteorologist Steve Fendero here with Chief Meteorologist Jeff Edmondson.
Hey, everyone.
Welcome to Wavy Plus Studio episode. I don't know what episode this is, but it's an episode of Beyond the Forecast.
Yes, it is an episode of Beyond the Forecast, and we have some fun things we're going to talk about today. One in particular that I'm excited to talk about the topic is a roll cloud.
Yeah.
Because roll clouds, I'm thinking here as we're getting started, it's been a long, maybe I saw one long ago, but I don't remember the last time I saw a roll cloud.
It was more so, I think it was in a time of severe weather or a thunderstorm or a front. I want to say it was in the fall, but it was more of like a wall cloud almost.
Yes.
You know, it wasn't, honestly, it might be the summer. I think I remember some viewers sent in some pictures down along the Outer Banks.
Okay,
Do you remember that one? But it was a
south.
couple of them.
Yeah.
It was north to south. There was like one or two of them in a row.
Yep. Because that wasn't
it's
the shelf
really
cloud from that
clue.
storm. These are different.
Yeah, there's a totally different. So
we should probably pull up the video.
let's kick off the precisely that. Let's get into rolling with roll clouds. Let's get into what they are and honestly, you know, they're super cool looking. I'm working out the kinks here. We have a Joanne sent this in.
Look at that.
I think this is from the Virginia Beach area, or kind of like where 64 and 264 meet up in Virginia Beach and Norfolk, and you can see it right there. It's like it is a line from, it almost is like a rainbow from horizon to horizon,
Kind of, yeah.
almost like a solid cloud. But it honestly, you know, the little foamy part of a wave when it's rolling up on the sand.
Sure,
That's
yes.
kind of what that reminds me of.
So what you have to do now, if you're not sure what you were looking at, block out all the gray clouds. Pretend they don't exist.
Yes, there you go.
And we're only looking at the darker one. And I have this remote control here. Basically, a roll cloud is kind of like this. There's an area of cloud that just rolls throughout the atmosphere. These are not tornadic type of clouds. These clouds do not mean that severe weather is coming necessarily. I've seen pictures of these before, especially from pictures like in Texas or into areas in the southwestern states. I've seen pictures of roll clouds where there's no top layer of higher level cirrostratus clouds. So the higher level clouds, again, are the gray ones, the darker stripe that goes all the way to the horizon, essentially is what it looks like, is the roll cloud. But it's like this in the sky. It's not touching down.
Yeah.
It's like this. It's like a barrel.
And here's a better picture of it, this one from the Ocean View area as well. And it's just because it was kind of hard with the video going back and forth. But
Yes.
that's what I did when I looked at the sky that evening. I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa.
And then the next day,
like
you're
looking at it.
back. Oh,
so
what
this
a-
was kind of more of a still image. And like you said, it's just that leading edge of a cloud kind of rolling through. And typically, I like to think of them forming when there's some sort of turbulence in the air, when there's up and down in the air. And in this situation, we kind of had that because it was cooler air was finally kicking in, and it was kicking out some of the warmer air we had. So that kind of just bumped the air, created a bit of a wave in a way.
Kind of like a gravity wave
Kind of
cloud,
like
but
a
a little
gravity
different
wave
because this
cloud.
is moving
Yeah.
on its own with its own air mass. I would say, I'm just kind of thinking here, Steve, this might be the most rare cloud for this area. Because we'll never get like a lenticular cloud, for example.
Just because of geographic locations,
Yeah.
the mountains. I will say one of the ones that I see the most that I wouldn't think I would see the most are the undulatus asperatus.
Yes.
Those one, they're fun to say, but usually we never. I mean, like that's one of the things. Like growing up, I never really noticed that.
Right.
Spending some time around the country, I never really saw them or noticed them, and then living here. Once or twice or 3 times a year, I'll notice them.
Yep.
Like, oh, there they are real quick. And that's another sign of turbulent air, like kind of up and down, bumpy air.
And what do those clouds look like? You don't have a picture, but
No.
I mean, that's where we have these weird, like, if you were to look
like
at the sky,
bubbles almost. It's like you're
Bubbles,
looking at the
yeah.
underneath of a cloud and you're seeing the little bulges up and the bulges down, and it kind of looks like there's little pockets or all that kind of stuff.
Like
Yeah,
if
different
you
from the Mattis clouds.
take
but
an ice cream scoop out of the cloud,
yes,
essentially.
yeah.
That's what it's kind of
they're
like.
really cool here. But yeah, I agree with you. Roll clouds are something we don't really see all that often.
Mm-hmm.
Seen gravity waves a bunch just because of the way we are downstream of the mountains to our west.
Yep.
So some cool stuff here.
Yeah.
Cool stuff in the clouds. It's always fun that Jeff and I love to talk about that. Not so cool stuff happening across town recently with severe weather. We are in severe weather season here.
Yes.
So we're going to take a quick little breather here. We want to get into our next topic and talk about that EF1 tornado that impacted communities in North Carolina. So we're going to take a quick little break. We've got some video and drone footage of some of the communities that were impacted. All right, welcome back. Just getting situated here, loading up some info from the EF1 tornado that impacted parts of northeast North Carolina. Jeff, you were here forecasting it on Sunday.
Yes.
You were here when the information came down on Monday from the National Weather Service here about what unfolded.
Yeah, this is not an ideal situation because this tornado touched down at 3:02 a.m. and then lifted around 3:06 in the morning. So we can see the path on the screen, 3.1 miles. It had a maximum width at one point of 100 yards, a football field wide. 8 injuries. Thankfully, the best part of this graphic here is fatalities is at 0. But it did have wind speeds at 110 miles an hour. The community that was impacted the most was right at touchdown when it went across that area just south of Woodville in North Carolina. You can see Elizabeth City farther down the distance. The tornado didn't go into into Elizabeth City, but this was a smaller tornado, but it still caused significant damage to the mobile home park that's in that area. This is part of a 3-day storm system that moved across the country. Day 1, Missouri, surrounding states. Day 2, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi. Day 3 was our area, and we had this one 20 damage area. Yes.
Yeah, and if you're curious of what 110 mile an hour wind can do, damaging wind is damaging wind, but when you get up there above 100 miles an hour, you're talking about some significant kind of life-altering, life-changing damage or a life-changing event. And this was some of the drone footage that was picked up in Perquimans counties from that community, that mobile park community. That really, hearing some of the stories and hearing some of the sound bites and the interviews from the residents there, just counting their blessings and being grateful for the fact that there were injuries, but no fatalities out of something like this. Yeah, homes just completely wiped out here. Severe weather is it's a reminder of how powerful the weather can be and how quickly it can alter your life.
So when we think of a tornado and we think of why is it more destructive than, so let's say we had 100 mile an hour wind blowing from point A to point B. So a steady one-directional wind will maybe blow down trees in one direction or maybe rip some shingles off of a home, but 100 mile an hour wind will hit your house and it won't cause that much damage compared to 100 mile an hour wind in a tornado, because instead of the wind blowing one direction and the house is kind of leaning over, taking the hit a little bit, now we have winds that are swirling at 110 or 100 miles an hour essentially. So it's that tearing, that ripping, that turbulent force that really causes damage to structures, because things can take a wind from one direction. We can't take it if we're spinning around. That's where the destruction kind of increases. I wouldn't want to say the word exponentially because that's probably not the case, but it does definitely increase when we have that spinning, intense motion. We've seen pictures and videos from previous tornado seasons. Haven't had them yet this season, but those tornadoes as they're on the ground, when they're in areas, especially where chasers are following them in Nebraska or Iowa, and you can just see that small, intense vortice touching the ground. That's the area that's so intense, and that truly is the area that isn't that well known, because how do you measure the wind speed in that area? It's impossible. Almost.
I mean, we've all seen Twister,
right.
How they measure that. It's like, how do you even go about doing that? And I like the analogy you're using, because it's almost like a sense of losing your balance in a way. Like you'd be able to withstand and hold if someone was pushing you from one direction, but if it's from multiple directions and kind of a twisting motion, then there's an extra element thrown in there, which is, an EF1 and EF0 is lower on the scale, but still you've looked at some of the damage. You know what I mean? There's no such thing as a weak tornado.
Right. Yes. One of my pet peeves is when someone calls a tornado violent, because there's no such thing as a gentle tornado.
Or the tornado is weak. It's still a tornado.
Right.
It's still going to cause some issues. I want to pull up the radar loop, Jeff, from the 3 o'clock hour. This is looping from. It's about an hour, correct? You're looping from. Let's see,
I think it was shorter. No, I only did this 2:45 to 3:15.
Okay, so in a 30-minute window here.
Quick.
This is what the radar looked like.
Yes.
And within right along, I mean, between Hertford and Elizabeth City, there was that little zone of rotation here. Jeremy was live on air, talking about it, guiding us through it here, and it was interesting setup here. It was like the one little zone that produced a tornado out of all of the wind and all of the thunderstorm activity that we saw overnight.
I mean, I was watching radar. Meteorologist Don Slater was here watching radar that evening before the severe weather happened at 3 a.m., And in a way, we're just kind of watching and sitting back and just looking at radar like, when is something going to happen? Is anything going to happen? And it eventually did. 3 o'clock in the morning, that's the worst time to have it because everyone is sleeping.
Yeah.
Everyone's sleeping
Overnight.
at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Some people may not be sleeping at 11 p.m. Some people may not be sleeping at 4 a.m., but everyone's sleeping at 3.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
it's just
it's
the
terrible.
worst kind of situation. And especially, too, because so sometimes, with our staffing to deal with and cover that,
tough.
there might be one person here, one
Right.
or two people here. So,
And we know the safe place. Go to a room without windows, lowest level of your home. Now, if your home is just a one story like it appears in this neighborhood, that helped. But everyone was in their bedrooms, which has windows. In a way, I don't know if, since the tornado warning and the tornado occurred very close, within seconds of each other, for people that were asleep, since they were laying in their beds covered with their bed sheets, maybe they were actually in a better spot than if it was 10
True.
p.m.
Yeah,
and
or
they're
they're
watching TV or something.
sitting by the window or something like that.
Right.
I was talking to my wife about that too. It's like, what in that situation, where do you go? What do you do? And I just said, just get on the floor and cover your head with a pillow,
Right.
and got to get away from the windows as best you can, center of the room, and hopefully that was the case. Like you said, everyone maybe sleeping, maybe they were safer in their bedrooms, being cushioned by their mattress or their pillow and that sort of situation.
And they're wrapped up at least.
Yeah,
I don't know.
spooky
But there was
stuff.
that one girl that was taken out of her home and put on top of the car, and she's doing fine, but in the same
A couple days
situation-
after her birthday too.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, a couple days after her birthday. I think we
Okay.
had a story on wavy.com about that too. Community came together and regifted her all the gifts that were, of course, taken away by that tornado.
Yeah.
So kind of the community coming together, and that's
Maybe
one
a
thing
future
that
meteorologist now,
yeah,
too.
maybe that's one thing we do like to see out of severe weather events is that the community always comes together in one way, shape, or form.
Yes.
And that is unfolded tenfold down along the Albemarle Sound in northeast North Carolina. So we've got the communities there in our thoughts, and they're going to be rebounding, putting the pieces back together, and moving forward in the spring season. And it's kind of a reminder that we've got more severe weather to deal with.
The tornado
Yeah.
frequency, we kind of teased it and showed it a
Yeah.
little bit earlier. Let's pop it back up.
Yeah,
because
let's take a breather here for a second,
we're gonna take a
Jeff,
break,
and then
okay.
and then we'll pop up and talk about the spring season that's unfolding and severe weather and everything that comes along with it. All right, welcome back in here. Spring season is upon us here, the spring equinox. We are entering severe weather season, already seen our fair share of some severe weather so far in the month of March, kind of coming in like a lion, out like a lamb. Severe weather, one word that always ties with it, tornadoes.
Yes.
Everyone always asks about it. I think it's mostly because everyone might be afraid of a tornado. I'm afraid of tornadoes. I
Yeah.
mean, there's no reason not to be scared of a tornado. I mean, it's one of the most destructive and devastating forms of weather.
They're incredible. They're fascinating. They're also very scary too.
Yeah.
So tornado frequency for just Virginia and North Carolina. April is the month when the frequency spikes. May, it starts to fade out a bit, and then once we get into June and July, we get so hot we don't get the dynamics in the atmosphere to get the big kind of synoptic scale, large scale, multi-state scale storm systems that generate the fronts that come through.
Like what we had earlier this week. Yeah.
Exactly.
And we typically see that usually in March and April because there's more access to colder air, as you're talking about. We're coming off of winter. March comes in like a lion, out like a lamb. That's the kind of mindset. So we still have access to that colder air, and it sets up those really, really dynamic weather systems that for us, most of the time, just give us a 75-degree day, and then there's showers and thunderstorms, and then the next day is like 55 degrees, and the
Right.
big temperature swings, kind of things like that.
Right.
That's a fun way to deal with it, but a lot of times the more dynamic a system is, the greater the potential for stronger thunderstorms. Now, there's a second peak on this
Yes, there
map here
is.
for Virginia, Northeast North Carolina, and that one's really interesting because that one is in hurricane season, August
Yes.
and September. The reason our tornado frequency in our part of the world goes up by the end of the summer and early September is peak hurricane season, the remnants of a tropical cyclone, a tropical storm coming up our way, or a hurricane coming up our way. Tornadoes, EF0s, EF1s, are very common in tropical cyclones, whether it's the remnants of one, whether it's a hurricane or a tropical storm, in those feeder bands. You know, the
Especially on the
bands
east
of heavy
side of the
rain
storm.
on the front right quadrant.
Yes.
And that tends to be the case if there's a storm that comes up the Gulf and then it's dying or falling apart and then it's coming up I-95. Well, guess who's on the east side of I-95?
That's us.
Hampton Roads and northeastern
That's
North Carolina. So we know that all too well, especially with Isaias was a situation like that, where it wasn't like a big storm, hurricane, where it was raining everywhere and there was big time storm surge. It was several little rain bands, so it wasn't raining on top of everyone all at once, but in those rain bands, you had several thunderstorms and there was multiple tornado warnings all at once.
I remember there's 4 tornado warnings at the same time during that. So that is that's a situation where you're seeing a line of storms coming at you and you don't know what to think. That can be quite scary. Tornadoes, you can see right here on the screen. So April, May, that's the season that we're heading into right now. The spring season, so we'll keep a close eye to see what happens. Now, when do they occur? 3 a.m. is not the time when they usually occur.
That's usually in the peak of the day when we have the most heat, 4 or 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock.
Yeah, towards the end of the day. See, and it's all about the air temperature. In this past situation, there was so much warmth coming from the south from the wind, that southerly breeze. That was the source of the fuel for these thunderstorms, compared to the normal source for fuel is the sun.
Yes.
That's where we get our normal source of fuel. So as the sun starts to set or gets lower in the sky at 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock, the air temperature does go down. It doesn't stay hot until sunset and then it gets colder. It gradually drops down, kind of like how the chart shows.
The chart shows there, yeah. Now, across the country, the average monthly for tornadoes across the country does align with when we typically see them in March, April, May. Across the country, it's usually May. That's for like the deep south and the Tennessee River Valley and the Mississippi River Valley and the plains.
Right.
But notice in August and September, when we here at home saw the spike of our average tornadic activity, that's not the case across the country because there's only a select amount of us that deal with tropical cyclones and tropical remnants and things like that here. So we are welcoming the spring season. It's all grand and dandy because we get the pollinators, we get more warmer days, we get longer days, we get the later sunsets, the earlier sunrises, but it does come with severe weather, and that is, I think, just due to part to the transition between winter being cold and summer being hot, and our average highs of the 50s in early March changed to an average high close to 80 by the end of the season, the end of spring near May. Now, this is meteorological spring, of course, so this is the 3 months between winter and summer, so March, April, and May. It's our transition. It's kind of, think of it like as long as winter's cold and summer's hot, everything that happens between March, April, and May it's up for grabs.
What's your favorite season?
I would say autumn, just because the things that go along with it. Big football fan, the holidays, but also some of the nicest weather, I think, because we have lower humidity. We get some of those nice cool fronts that come in. It's not too cold. You get some refreshing days. And I look over here to spring and say, it's kind of the same setup, except it's going the other way. Instead of it ending cold, you're going towards summer being hot. So as we get into the spring equinox, which, of course, is coming up on the 20th here, or depending on when you're watching this, it may have happened or so. So this week, plus or minus a couple days around the spring equinox, is when we kind of have equal day and equal night, 12 hours a day, 12 hours a night, around that time frame. So once we get past the equinox, we are just gaining more and more daylight every day. More daylight means more heat in the northern hemisphere. More heat in the northern hemisphere means the jet stream is changing its position. It's shifting from its winter setup to its summer setup. So in that transition, it's changing its dynamics, and I like to think it's a little bit more volatile.
And one thing, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but the equal day, equal night, everyone thinks that on the equinox, that day should be 12 hours exactly of daylight.
Doesn't work like that.
And night. But it doesn't, because the sun is a disk. When we look at the sun, when we had this last eclipse, when you looked at it, it's a disk. It's not a point of light.
Just
so that's
one
the difference.
Spot, yeah.
If it was
because
a point of light.
Because you see a little bit of sun. You will see light as the sun comes up over the horizon, and that's not when it's fully passing the horizon. Exactly. When the point's in the center.
So what is sunrise? Because everyone would say sunrise is when you see the first point of light. Fair?
Sure. But we consider that first light? Or sunrise when the sun is...
Or the center of the disk.
Or the center, or when it's completely above the horizon.
Or
the bottom.
See? And then when do you call sunset? You would say sunset is when... I would say when it disappears.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
But it takes time for the disk to cross the horizon.
Yeah.
At least... Okay.
So it's never going to be
the Earth is rotating.
Yeah,
the sun isn't rising or setting, so let me get that off. Okay.
Also, here the sun passes over the equator. The Earth is positioned in its orbit around the sun so that the sun is aligned with the equator because the sun's not moving. We're moving around the sun.
Right, because the Earth is tilted. So at one point, it's on this side of the sun, we're in the summertime. On this point of the sun, we're in the wintertime, or vice versa for southern and northern hemisphere. But the 23.5 degree tilt is the reason for the seasons.
Is the reason for the seasons.
Yes, it is.
Because we're just gaining light. The tilt of the Earth, as you talked about, the northern hemisphere is going to be facing, once we get to the summer solstice, is going to be at its peak. It's going to be facing the sun the most, so we get the most sunlight, we get the most daylight, we get the most heat, yada, 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 yada. So astronomical spring is what we've always grown up to know. The 20th of March to the 21st of June, the 21st of June being the summer solstice, which is when we kick off the summer season. This is why I also think the summer solstice, this is why I prefer meteorological seasons. They just make sense to me a little bit more.
Because they follow a date.
Yes. Correct. Whereas the summer solstice on June 21st is kind of like, we're going to the summer solstice, so we are peaking there. And that's when we start summer. So if we start summer on the solstice, then throughout summer, we are losing daylight, we are losing warmth, we are moving away from the summer solstice. I mean, we're not losing warmth because of the way the atmosphere works, but we're losing daylight. It's going the opposite way. So it's like, oh, we're starting the summer season. We made it to summer, but
days are getting shorter.
Now days are getting shorter. Yeah. So it's just kind of it's just a weird way for me to think of it like that. That's why I like to use the meteorological seasons, because sometimes it just makes it a little bit easier. It's based on temperatures. It's just based on dates. Yeah.
Final thought for me. I love the astronomical part of it, because when we get the days are getting shorter, that means that we're getting closer to winter, which is my favorite season.
Which is your favorite season?
Because the nice thing about winter, you have the shortest day, which is December. There's never any snow on the ground then, at least. Well, here there's never, but up north there's really not much. Once we get into January and February is one of my favorite winter months because you have longer days and it's still cold. And I love skiing.
That's true, yeah.
And it's a great
That's right.
month.
That sun sets a little bit later.
Yeah, it's an underrated month for winter sports.
Or just winter in general, because I think we're crawling out of some of the darker days of December, like you talked about.
Yeah, because January can be really cold in those northern states, but once you get into February, it can still get cold, but you get those longer days. You just get that extra half hour or so, and it really helps it out.
Now, since, Jeff, your favorite season, of course, winter, we did have a doozy of a winter in terms of snowfall.
Yes.
Not saying there's no chance of snow in the spring. We've had it and had it before.
Very rare.
But maybe in next week's episode, we could tie the active winter season we had in terms of rain, in terms of snow, and maybe see if there's any sort of correlation with the pollen this spring. You know, because that can be connected, and I know you're an allergy sufferer, and many of us do have the sniffles. You know, my wife's she deals with it horribly all spring season here. So maybe that's something we could look forward to in the next episode here, tying your favorite season to one of my favorite seasons.
Sounds good.
There we go.
All right.
All right. Thanks for watching here on our latest episode of Behind the Forecast here. We'll have some more for you guys.
We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.